Hello and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Wargaming unit reviews for Star Wars Legion. Again, we are staying in the vein of the Republic today, although potentially branching out a little bit, and looking at the units operative of R2-D2, and by proxy, C-3PO. Now, R2 is a very interesting unit in a number of ways. Firstly, I think he's the first bipartisan unit in Star Wars Legion where he works for both the Grand Army of the Republic and the Rebel faction. After that, he plays very uniquely also, and is one of the more interesting units in the game. And lastly, and this is maybe a bit of a stickler for some people, including myself, is how R2 and C-3PO are packaged. Now, touching on that first point as a sort of preface, this is more of a review for R2 and C-3PO for the Republic faction, I suppose. Not just because it's the faction I play, but also because I'm not too familiar with the Rebels at all, of all the four factions. But I do also feel, from what I know about Rebels, is that R2 might synergize a bit more with the clones. And again, I think that's mainly because of the sharing tokens ability that the clone troopers have. C-3PO, of course, is going to give you the calculate odds ability, which we'll talk about later, which is going to help that kind of token generating system with the Grand Army of the Republic. With Rebels, I'm sure it'll be useful, especially with the nimble keyword, because you do get a dodge token in there. But overall, I think with the Rebels, R2 is just going to sort of play more as an operative. If you're a Rebel player or you have experience with the Rebels, let me know if I'm wrong about that. Leave a comment below and explain how he might synergize more than just beyond that nimble dodge generator. But let's go ahead and jump into R2's stat line, because right off the bat, it's a pretty unique card. To start, he is a mere 35 points. That is about as cheap as it gets in Legion at the moment, especially for operatives. For upgrades, he only has a spot for comms, which might seem underwhelming at first, but I think it's pretty thematically fitting. And once you kind of get the grip of how this unit plays, you don't really need more than that. Then you see he has a white defense dice, 4 health, 2 courage, surge to hit, and defensive surge. So looking at his health pool, it's not fantastic. For 35 points, 4 wounds isn't terrible though, if you compare that to most trooper units that only have 4 models in it. He also has courage 2, which honestly, I feel like R2 should have infinite bravery, because he is one of the bravest characters in the Star Wars universe. But that being said, bravery is not going to be that much of an issue for R2. He also has a white defensive dice, which is not ideal. But, you know, he is a little astromech droid. He's not a big, hulking, tanky armored unit. And he does have defensive surge. And defensive surge is really good on white dice because you're effectively doubling the chance to block a wound coming in on you. After that, we're going to see that R2-D2 has a movement speed of 1, which is maybe one of the biggest drawbacks that this unit has. And we'll get into that when we start looking at his special rules. But we'll move on to offensive right now. And we have a melee to range 1 electroshock with 3 white dice, suppressive, and surge to hit. Now, it's really not very impressive, but once you kind of figure out how R2 works, you'll realize that electroshock is pretty low down on the list of priorities when it comes to his stats. Though I will make note that the surge to hit is going to be useful with some of his command cards. But really what makes R2 play the way he does is in his special rules. So off the bat we have Repair 2, Capacity 2. Not exactly fantastic or too useful. It's very thematic, it's fitting, and there may be a strategy that makes use of this special trait. But for the most part, his major play is going to come from the secret mission keyword, which is basically the good guys variant of bounty. Now, at first glance, it's not the most exciting sounding thing, but Legion is a game about scoring objectives. It is not a game about killing. It is an objective-based game, and I have a lot of respect for Fantasy Flight Games for making that the core focal point of Star Wars Legion. And really, when you take that into consideration and you keep that in, the frontal lobe of your brain, you're going to realize that Secret Mission is a very good keyword, as it allows your army to score additional victory points to win the game. For those of you who aren't familiar with Secret Mission, Basically, to score that additional victory point, this unit needs to enter the enemy deployment zone and then stay alive till the end of the match, and you score that 1 victory token. Now, you might look at R2 and say, 4 wounds, white defense die, speed 1 movements. It's not looking like great odds to get that. But fortunately, R2-D2 has the inconspicuous keyword, which means if he has a suppression token on him, an enemy cannot attack him so long as there is another enemy unit to attack. It also allows R2 to choose not to remove suppression tokens at the beginning of your activation, which will help keep him incognito while he scoots across the board. And that gives R2 this sort of perfect foil to score that secret mission. All that said, it might be a race against the clock to do so more so than race against your enemy's firepower, because R2 is grounded, he cannot climb or clamber, and he has only 1 movement speed. That is not very quick, and if you have a terrain-dense table, you're going to have to really spend a lot of time moving R2 across the field. And with rather mediocre combat stats, you're probably going to prioritize R2-D2 to scoring that secret objective. But we'll talk more about that when we get to unit strategy. In the meantime, let's go ahead and look at everyone's favorite human-cyborg relations, C-3PO. Now, C-3PO is a counterpart attachment that you can add on to the R2-D2 unit for 15 points. That bumps the unit from 35 up to 50 points, and it's no longer in that cheap as chips range. Though at 50 points, I think R2 is still the cheapest operative in the game. Now, 3PO, again, is not going to add much to your basic stat line, but again, he's going to really layer it on in the special keywords. He's adding just 2 health, which is still good. Going from 4 to 6 health definitely increases the tankiness of R2 and means before you get that suppression token to get inconspicuous, you will be able to take a little bit of firepower. If you just have that 4 health, an enemy might get wise, and they might focus fire really hard on R2 and take him out in one fell swoop with 4 damage. The extra 2 health from 3PO, especially when you consider the defensive surge, is definitely going to help keep him alive from stray shots like that. And for the attack pool, 3PO is just adding 1 white dice at range melee. But I believe 3PO is most interesting in the 2 keywords he's going to add to this unit. The first being Calculate Odds, which is a single action and allows you to choose a friendly trooper unit at range 1 and in line of sight, and that unit gains 1 aim, 1 dodge, and 1 suppression token. And keep in mind this can be used on R2 and C-3PO themselves. So if you want to trigger that inconspicuous right off the bat, you can do that first turn, first thing with Calculate Odds, and then nobody will be able to shoot at this unit. However, that will maybe not be the best use of an aim and a dodge token you get with that, but if you're going for secret mission, it's definitely a strategy to consider. And the next ability after that is basically the polar opposite of inconspicuous, and that is Distract, which is a free action, and you choose an enemy trooper unit at range 1 to 2 and in line of sight, and until the end of that round, you lose inconspicuous, and when that unit attacks, it can only attack R2-D2 and C-3PO. Now, both of those keywords are going to add a lot more play to this unit and how they interact with the rest of your army. And while I don't think C-3PO is a must-take with R2, especially if you're trying to score that secret mission, I think it's definitely something to look at. Now, for the comm slot, there's a few options that are viable here, although I do think R2 and 3PO are pretty solid on their own and don't need too many more points pumped into them to buff them up. But let's start from the top with Comms Jammer. You could comms jam enemies with R2. It wouldn't be easy to do with that range or that movement 1, but it could be really trolly, especially if you get inconspicuous on him and he's sitting in a bubble in the middle of your enemies, but they can't shoot at him because, say, there's a friendly trooper out in the open. I think that could be pretty hilarious, but I don't really see it being a viable strategy. I see it being very situational, but it would definitely be a game that your friends would talk about. It's not something I would say completely pass over, but for the most part, I don't think you're going to be using Comms Jammer. Next, we have Long Range Comlink, and that might be slightly useful. We're going to talk about one thing with this operative where they're the only operative in the clone army right now, and when you're in battle, units like this that operate very differently and very separately from the main bulk of your force, you're going to want their order tokens separated from your trooper tokens and your hero tokens, so that way you're not pulling it in situations where you need combat to be done, like dire situations where you have an enemy in your face and you need a clone squad or Rex or Obi-Wan to activate. So stuff like this that helps get them a face-up order token and out of your order pool is not a bad idea, though I think there might be better options than the long-range Comlink, because while it is helpful to have them with a face-up order token, if you have to give them that face-up order token rather than your troops, it's not mitigating much and you're kind of just reallocating your resources. And after that, we have HQ Uplink, which is the most expensive comms upgrade, although it is a very powerful one. This will allow you to get this unit's order token face up on their own without spending other orders by exhausting the card. The only problem with this is if you want to have this happening every turn, you're going to have to spend one of R2's activations readying this card. And if you notice, Inconspicuous only allows you to keep your suppression during your rally step, not if you make a recovery order. If you do that, you will still lose your suppression and lose your Inconspicuous. So because of that, and mainly because of the high points cost, I would say skip over HQ Uplink. Though if you do want to use R2 and 3PO for a sort of supporting role, and the bulk of your army dishing out those tokens with calculate odds, it might be a viable option. And lastly, we have Comms Relay. Now, there is a cheeky little maneuver you can do with Comms Relay with one of R2's command cards, but I think we'll save that for the command card itself. Though I'll say it up front right now, I don't think the little maneuver you can do with this is worth 5 points. I think those 5 points are best spent elsewhere in your army, and this unit can probably be best run without comms upgrades. But that moves us along to R2's command cards, which are, I'll be honest, a little bit underwhelming, but I think when you pay for a unit, you're also sort of paying for their command cards that come with them, and at 35 points, these are something that you'd probably expect. The first being Blast Off. R2-D2 increases his maximum movement by 1 speed and gains 1 dodge token and 1 suppression token, disengage, and also jump 1. Now, you see right off the bat here with this 1-pip card, it is a foil to a lot of R2's shortcomings. His movement speed is buffed, he gains jump 1, which allows him to get past a lot of terrain that would otherwise shut him off and cause him to go around. There's also a dodge, which helps keep him alive with his weak defense dice, but that's kind of rendered pointless because you get that sweet suppression token that activates Inconspicuous. And on top of all that, the disengage is nice in case you do find yourself in a bit of a situation. However, like most of R2's cards, it is only going to affect himself. After that, for R2's 2-pip, we have Impromptu Immolation. Now, this is his one really offensive card that kind of buffs him up. Your attack profile is changed from 0 to 1, 2 dice, but you gain Blast and Spray on top of Suppressive. That means for every model in the unit you're attacking, you roll 2 white dice. Factor in the Surge to hit, and all of a sudden, you have a decent little flamethrower unit. Definitely not a game-winning card, but definitely something that can catch your enemy off guard and maybe help your other troopers around you get some relief from incoming firepower. And finally, we get R2's 3-pip, which is Smokescreen, as seen in The Empire Strikes Back. And this is the one card that allows R2-D2 to activate another trooper along with him, and when he issues an order to another friendly trooper, it may perform a single Speed 1 move action. At the start of the activation phase, R2-D2 also shoots a smoke grenade onto the field. Now, smoke isn't fantastic, but being able to move another unit for free is pretty nifty, especially when you consider how much free movements clones get, especially with things like Rex's scouting party. And this ability, of course, is going to be the one that calls back to the Comms Relay upgrade. So, the Comms Relay reads, when you would be issued an order, you may choose a friendly unit at range 1 to 2 and issue the order to them instead. So this allows R2 and 1 trooper to be issued the orders. So that order that goes to R2, you can instead take it and issue it onto another soldier, and under the text of Smokescreen, it says when R2-D2 issues an order to another friendly trooper and may perform a Speed 1 move. That means you can relay your order onto R2 and instead affect 2 trooper units with this card and make them both move once, further boosting your army's control across the battlefield. Definitely a neat gimmick, but again, I don't know if it's quite worth 5 points. So, overall, what do I think of R2's command cards? Well, I think they're great for R2. For an army, not so much. Blast Off is a really good one if you're trying to score that secret objective. It'll let you get over complicated obstacles, it'll let you disengage, and it'll increase your movement so you can get into that enemy deployment zone and get that sweet, juicy victory point. And while I think I would take this over Ambush, I don't think I would ever take it over Hello There or Call Me Captain, one of which generates more tokens and one of which greatly increases the damage output from one of your characters. However, I'm not as optimistic about Impromptu Immolation and Smokescreen. Immolation might be fun, and flamethrowers are really, really cool in this game, and it's pretty hilarious to see R2 roast enemy units, but I just don't think it's that great. Even basic cards like Push allows you to put 2 units face up, which for clones is very efficient when you take fire support into consideration. The same goes for Smokescreen. You could have 1 to 2 units move a speed 1 movement, or you could have 3 face-up friendly clone troopers ready to fire support when needed. Keep in mind that that little gimmick that allows you to move an extra unit costs more points too. So overall, I think R2's 1-pip Blast Off is worth considering, especially if you're only running 1 commander and he's your only operative, but I think the other 2 should more or less be skipped. So how exactly does R2 fit into an army, and how exactly would I field him? Well, as a veteran wargamer, one thing I always find myself telling new players is to commit your units to a role. And this especially applies to units that lack maneuverability. In bolt action, you see this mistake made with tanks all the time, where people want it to shoot, they want it to advance, they want it to engage these infantry over here, but they also want it to fight this armor. And at the end of the game, despite trying to do all of it, it ends up failing to accomplish any of it. And I really think this bit of advice is going to hold true to R2-D2 and potentially C-3PO in Legion. You're really going to need to know what you want them to do before the game starts the second you put them into your list. And I think the most obvious strategy for R2 is trying to score that secret mission. I think most players are going to use a cheap R2 to pad out their activations and also try and get that extra victory point. And Padme has also been announced for an operative for the Grand Army of the Republic, and she too has secret mission. And I could see a meta with the Republic being a double secret mission operative list, trying to overwhelm your enemy by trying to get in their deployment zone while the bulk of your clones kind of come down on their forces. Now that bit is speculation, but Padme or no, people are definitely going to be using R2 for secret mission. And if you do so, I would say don't put C-3PO in there. The only real use you're going to get from C-3PO is using that calculate odds on yourself to get that suppression and stay inconspicuous. The 2 health is nice, but if you do inconspicuous correctly, you probably won't need it. Aside from giving yourself inconspicuous, you're probably not going to use the calculate odds, and you definitely won't be using the overhear ability to draw fire on your secret mission unit. So if you're going to play R2 for the secret mission, maybe run him absolutely bare bones and fully dedicate him to moving. Yes, speed 1 isn't much, but if you do it back to back, it is going to get you across the field. It just relies on your commitment as a wargaming commander. No distractions. Do not stop to tase somebody. Do not make a U-turn to... If you do take 3PO, do not stop and hold place to give someone calculate odds. Just keep hoofing it. You also may seriously want to consider taking that single pip card to help him get into the objective zone. I know I said most other cards you're going to want more than that, but it almost ensures you that you're going to get past difficult terrain that would otherwise block you and get your movement up to get that victory point. I would certainly take Blast Off over Ambush. That being said, I don't know if I would take it over Call Me Captain if you're running with Rex. Call Me Captain can be very powerful if you're playing an aggressive army. If you know you're going to be up against a more gunline-oriented foe, maybe you could take Blast Off over Captain. But that choice is going to rely on your knowledge of the enemy and the knowledge of your own strategy. If you know your Rex is going to be in the enemy's face that game, whether it be your aggressiveness or the opponent's, you're going to want Call Me Captain over Blast Off. Now, I would never take Blast Off over Hello There. And with more operatives coming out for the Clone Wars as time goes by, I could definitely see R2's cards kind of falling by the wayside. His one pip is his one card that is good at this one strategy. And in the future, if you're running him with 2 other operatives or commanders, I think it's going to have a lot of competition for your most viable card to bring. And to reiterate from earlier, I would skip over Smokescreen and Impromptu Immolation for this strategy. But R2 definitely isn't a one-trick pony, and while the secret mission is probably the most obvious avenue of play with him, there's definitely other things you can do. My second strategy that I would deploy him with is a sort of supporting unit for your main clone force. And basically what you're going to do here is you're going to use him to pad out your activations and to dish out tokens to other clones. Now with this strategy, you're definitely going to want to take C-3PO. And he's going to use that calculate odds to push it onto your clone troopers and give them that dodge, that aim, and a suppression. Now, off the bat, you think, I don't want to be putting suppressions on my clones. Clones don't have the best ways to deal with suppression. But don't forget that suppression also gives you one cover. It can definitely help you out if you plan on taking some heat. Add that on top of that dodge token you get, and you're really upping the survivability of a unit. That's great for clones, and honestly, great for Obi-Wan Kenobi, too, if you want to put that dodge on him so he can start reflecting with his Guardian 3. Now, 50 points might sound expensive just for a token generator, but when the enemies start to encroach upon you, you can go ahead and pull C-3PO's Distract ability. That way you can force the spearhead of the enemy assault to engage a support unit that's not doing much damage output. And keep in mind that Distract move is free, so then you can calculate odds, put it onto this unit themselves, they gain 1 suppression token, they have cover, they gain a dodge, then you can also take another dodge action after that, and bam, you're ducking 3 of those incoming shots coming at this unit. It's a very trolly way to kind of blunt your enemy's attack, and trust me, a lot of times they won't expect it, because it is a counterpart upgrade on a supporting unit. And with this strategy, if you really want to, if you're really feeling cheeky, you can go ahead and take that Impromptu Immolation over Push. And when your enemies get really close, R2 can jump in there, pop that, torch some enemies, tie some enemies up in melee combat, while your clones dust up the rest of the enemies nearby. It's definitely not a strategy, and like I said, I would still recommend taking Push most of the time over Impromptu, just so you can get fire support going, especially with Rex, especially with Call Me Captain. But, you know, it's something you might want to try in casual play. And my final strategy that I would play with R2 is basically using him as a repair unit. And this most indefinitely goes alongside with the TX-130 Saber Tank. Now, the Saber Tank has 9 health. If you have R2 next to him repairing it, it effectively has 11. That's very, very spongy. And if you want R2 to repair the tank alone, just run him completely bare bones and make use of that repair capacity too. But this strategy absolutely can double dip in with the previous one, as R2 and 3PO playing as a support unit, and having them repair the tank and dish out tokens to friendly units nearby. I think they synergize pretty well with the Republic in that regard, and once I get a Saber Tank, I'm very interested in trying this out. I wish I could give more info on how they would work with a Rebel army, but to be honest, I just don't think they do work as well with a Rebel army, because the clones have that token sharing ability that really makes use of calculate odds a bit more. And also, I just don't really see the Rebels making use of vehicles quite as much as the clones. I think in media we have far more representations of vehicles, which means we'll probably end up with more vehicles at the end of the day. And sure, Rebels get things like the Air Speeder, the Land Speeder, and ATRTs, but those are all very mobile units that I don't think R2 is going to be able to keep up with. So because of that, I think R2-D2 is just going to mesh so much better with the Grand Army of the Republic than he would with Rebels. Then you layer it on when you take a look at Padme, and she has Secret Mission also. I think that might be the Republic's trait akin to Empire's suppression abilities. I think they might give us a large amount of Secret Mission characters as a sort of army gimmick. I mean, think about it. Right now, we only have 2 known operatives, and both of them have that trait. I could be wrong about that. I mean, let me know what you think. Are there Rebel characters that have secret mission? I don't think so. I think R2 was the first. But that's basically my exclamation point at the end of the argument that R2 is going to synergize with Republic more so than Rebels. But let's get on to the model itself. And I guess an important question, should you buy R2-D2? First of all, the model of R2 in C-3PO is awesome. They were so fun to put together and paint. A little difficult to paint R2 actually and get on the inside of his legs and get all those really fine details because he is very, very tiny. Nevertheless, I had a blast. I actually painted my R2 up as R4 and my C-3PO up as that silver droid you see in the beginning of Episode 1, the one who gets serves the drinks to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and gets gassed in the room. I decided to go full prequel with it, and I thought it'd be cool to see R4 running around on the battlefield next to Obi-Wan. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? R2 and C-3PO are part of this sort of packaging gimmick, I want to say, where they come with the down escape pod. So rather than being a $12 or a $20 upgrade, it's a $40 box. And it comes with a terrain piece and scenario bits. And I do like the Crash Escape Pod as a model, but it's not a great terrain piece. It doesn't really block line of sight very much. And the scenarios for it, they just seem a little too gimmicky for my taste. And granted, I haven't played them. Maybe they're a ton of fun, but you can't mesh them in with your standard deck. So they just don't really feel like it's worth the money. And you do feel like you're just sort of being taxed. That being said, at the moment, there's no other operatives out for the Republic. We have Padme announced, but release dates have been pushed back. They've been pushed back and they already were late. But I don't think she's coming anytime soon. So it's kind of almost a necessity, especially with an expensive army where you need to pad out your activations with cheaper units. I think R2 is definitely something Republic players should pick up. Now, if you're a Rebel player, I think there's so many more heroes I would get for $40 before I got R2 and C-3PO. But for us clone players, at the time being, with just 2 commanders, 1 operative, and 1 operative down the pipeline several months, I think it's definitely a solid buy, especially if you have that saber tank. So thank you for listening, guys. I know this was a longer video. We kind of had a lot to cover with R2 because he plays so uniquely. And this is also the first operative/commander unit that I reviewed that has cards in your command deck. So we have to go over those as much as we have to go over equipment and strategies and all that stuff. But I hope this video helps you kind of get an idea of R2 and how he plays and whether you want to buy him for your army. If you want to see more content like this, I'm trying to crank them out daily now that we're on lockdown. It is currently April of 2020. You know what that means. So if you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, I'm definitely going to be churning out content like this. And if you do have R2-D2 and C-3PO, let me know how you field them. Have you played the escape pod missions? Let me know how they play. Are they fun? I know there's a little gimmick where the escape pod kind of crashes into the ground and can hurt units nearby. I think that's pretty cool. And I might give it a spin someday if somebody entices me into doing it. But until next time, guys, take care.